Ruff, certified financial planner here. I'm with one of my colleagues, LPL colleagues, and fellow CFP certified financial planner, Jimmy D. Did I pronounce that right?
Yes,
right.
Anthony.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse.
I got it. So I'm with Jimmy, and one thing, Jimmy is the founder. He trademarked and he created what's called the Fruitful Retirement. And what it is it's really a roadmap and it's a process for financial advisors to take their clients through, because sometimes we just go all willy-nilly. And I read through it. Jimmy, tell us a little bit about the Fruitful Retirement. I'm going to grab it, actually.
Yeah, well, basically the art of creating and living the fruitful retirement is really starting with providing emotional and financial clarity for life's transitions. And we all go through transitions in our life, from buying a home, getting married, having kids, transitioning careers, and ultimately looking up at that big transition into financial freedom. And so the Fruitful Retirement is looking at that from each particular perspective of how do you plant that seed to basically harvest what it is that you want out of life, what's your purpose. And so there are some qualitative things that go into that, of course, that you have to look at internally, and we ask certain questions to kind of build that out of you and think about that. But also is the financial part, the quantitative part, to say what do you need to do to get there.
How do we get where you want to go and define that? And then you leave them with very specific, hey, you need to do this, and this.
That's correct. And what we found through thousands of appointments over the years, Anthony, what I found is people that are transitioning into retirement, which I hate the word retirement, retire, because it's to cease. And the most successful retirements are those that say, I'm busier now than when I was working, right? But what I found is that there are 3 different categories that people are in, and each could actually be classified by a fruit. And so the Fruitful Retirement has another connotation, which is when you're entering retirement, what fruit are you? What does that look like? And how do you plan based on that type of fruit?
You call me a fruit?
Huh? You're a pear, an apple, or a strawberry?
I'm built like a pear.
He's a strawberry.
I keep putting
He's
weight
a strawberry.
All right, so let me change gears on. Let me ask you this question. So as a CFP, if there was one concept that you could, when a client comes into your practice, and if there was one thing that you wouldn't have to explain, you wouldn't have to try and drill into their heads, you could just wave just a magic wand and they just take your advice blindly. Like,
sure. I'm
just going to do whatever Jimmy says. What would that thing be? That's a tough question. I just came up with that.
But that's pretty good. It's a great question. Yeah. Man, he's tough. He is tough. The number one reason people are successful financially is their behavior. Mm-hmm. But most of the time their behavior is not aligned appropriately with their action. So you really want to align your action toward what it is you want out of life. We have probably different goals, just as anyone else. It might be the same reason you want financial flexibility, but that means different things to different people, right? Based on your own situation. So I would say really do an audit internally, which is what we as advisors, as CFPs do.
Right.
And if you actually are aligned appropriately, our job, right, is to kind of poke holes. What could happen if things go wrong? What if there's a bad market? What happens in the next recession? What if you lose a loved one? Things like that.
When I do planning for clients, what I do is I start and I work backwards from here's the worst possible case scenario that can happen, and then we build backwards from there. Because if we can deal with the worst and that's planned for, then all we have is upside from there. And that is risk management. That's not just investment. That's investments. That is from an insurance perspective. That's a premature death. That's a disability. That's if you live too long. If you're like Benjamin Button and you age in reverse. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways to stress test not a client's just a portfolio, because that's kind of, that's the fun part. That's the sexy part. Is like the investment part. The risk management portion is so critical to address. So we start with the worst case scenario and then we work backwards. And that could be is something like, hey Anthony, I want to buy a second house. Okay, well, let's talk about the risks, the cash flow risks. Let's talk about the maintenance risks. If how do we plan for the expenses of a second home, and under what could possibly happen where you may lose that? How do we prevent that from happening? Just a random kind of thing that comes up.
Well, and you're looking at alternative options in that case, for example. Well, you could rent a very nice home for a week or two or a couple months a year and not have all that added financial responsibility.
Yep.
And what are you looking for in your life? Which actually goes back to what's important to you at that moment in time and the decisions you make.
Well, I think what you're getting at is, what is it? What is it about the second home that makes you want to purchase it?
Yep.
What experience are you looking for? Mm-hmm. What is it that are you trying to create? Maybe you have kids that are, kind of graduated from college and moved out, and you're looking for a draw to get them back in because you miss, that family feeling. So do you have to spend maybe $500,000 on a beach home to do that? Or, as Jimmy suggested,
$5,000 a month.
Could you do that for
a couple months?
For $15,000 for the summer and recapture that draw with less?
And how many years would it take you to break even on that? Do you want to be a landlord, right? Well, if you want to win...
Now we start spreadsheeting and things get old.
If you want to win, you got to find out what's important now.
Right.
And then you also have to think about what's going to be important later in those decisions and how the consequences. But you had mentioned Benjamin Button earlier, right?
Yeah.
I think we're like a fine wine, right? We're just getting better as we get older. Isn't that right, Anthony?
I hope so.
Huh?
I mean...
He's at a loss for words. I don't know if I've ever got him at a loss for words before.
Well, nobody ever said I get better looking as I get older, so I don't know how to deal with that. All right, so... I think that's pretty much. Well, anyway, this is Jimmy. He's a fellow CFP. I love what he does. He's got the Fruitful Retirement. I love his process. It's very important to have a process. That's like 90% of the battle. Any last words? Final thought?
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Much appreciated. Keep following him.